have another fine set of panelists with us today to talk about the future of video games. So directly to my right, say again for those who are here, my name is Chris Nolasinas. I'm the curator for the Art of Video Games exhibition at the Smithsonian. And we have a wonderful panel for you. Directly to my left is Mark Delora. I've known Mark, gosh, it's going on 12 years now? 13 years. Mark has been a senior technologist in the games industry for quite some time. He's had a variety of roles at Google, Nintendo, Sony, Ubisoft, and THQ. He also served as the editor-in-chief of Game Developer magazine back when I met Mark. So, Mr. Mark Delora. Directly to his left in the most awesome jacket you will ever see. And you can find Mr. Barnett at any trade show wearing this. Paul is the Senior Creative Director for BioWare Mythic. He developed AOL's first interactive game, Legends of Terrace, and is best known for Games Workshop's Warhammer Fantasy Battle Universe. Mr. Paul. Next we have Ken Levine, originally a screenwriter and playwright. He has designed games like Looking Glass's Thief, The Dark Project, and System Shock 2, which is quite frightening, and served as a project director of BioShock for the PC and Xbox 360. And we have with us Kelly Santiago, who is the co-founder and current president of That Game Company. Was named as one of Kotaku's most influential women in games in 2010, and is a partner in Indie Fund, which helps indie developers reach and maintain financial independence. All right, take it away. So the panel that we just had before was really talking about the evolution of games. Starting at the beginning, and some of the problems that earliest game developers had, how to go to convey story, how to convey tension ideas through very minimalist technologies, and how still you're able to create inspired works and art that comes out of these things, even with technological limitations. For this panel, we want to talk about the future of games. You know, with technology becoming less and less of a barrier for describing worlds, for describing art, how are we going to harness these mediums moving forward, this technology base moving forward to create new experiences? So with that, I'd like to start by talking to Kelly about the idea behind one of the games that That Game Company did, which was Flow. And if you could talk to us.
Thank you.
And the reason I want to start with this is it's a game that when I first experienced it was foreign yet familiar to me. And it wasn't until I actually started engaging with it that I better understood what some of it is. Can you talk to us a bit about how the game came about and its intent?
Yeah, it's funny because you get that question of like, how you guys make such innovative games, how do you make innovative games? And we're like, well, Flow is like Snake, so, but it's not so. We just take old ideas and remix them essentially, which is the creative process. So Flow started as part of the MFA thesis project by my business partner Genova Chen, and his work was to apply the psychological theory of flow developed by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. It's a great book on flow theory and sort of how we become as humans just the sense of fun and engaged in any given activity. And after doing this research and talking with various people in different fields on this state, many of them would describe it as a feeling of like flowing through water. When you're in that state, you sort of lose track of time because you're just so engaged. It came as a result of the response to our previous student project called Cloud. And Cloud was a game where we were really trying to take this idea of making a game about a subject that we felt hadn't been covered in the video game marketplace, and which we thought could appeal to a wide variety of people, regardless of their gamer or non-gamer status, which was the feeling of what it feels like to be a kid and daydream while you're looking at the clouds. And so in the game, you play as this boy who's trapped in a hospital who daydreams he can fly through the clouds, and it's a really simple game. But what we found is that it did attract people who wouldn't normally be downloading games onto their computers, but the controls were so hard, and it sort of still relied on some ideas of what playing a game meant. So Chernobyl wanted to take this flow theory and apply it to a game to sort of create an experience that was also, from a technological and interactive perspective, accessible to a wide variety of people. And so in Flow, it's a really simple game where you play as this abstract aquatic organism and you eat. That's your action. And through eating, you determine your experience as a player. You can eat these red foods that take you down to harder, more complex levels. You can eat blue foods that keep you sort of at a higher, more simpler level, and you can engage in combat with other creatures through eating them, or you can just experience it and keep swimming all the way down and just sort of see the sights in the game. So that's where the idea of flow came from.
Thank you. Ken, you and I spoke very briefly before we started the panel here, and one of the things I was describing to you is about how mechanics tend to stay the same. They tend to persist over time. Kelly describing Flow as really Snake, right, which is a very rudimentary sort of game, one that actually has roots all the way back in Snafu on the Intellivision. Mr. Keith Robinson right here, Robinson right here in the front. In the games that you create, your worlds tend to be very expansive, tend to have a lot of very deep story and reflection, social reflection within it. But at the root, there are some base mechanics that are always true. Can you talk about how you appropriate those mechanics into the bigger stories that you try to tell?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a basic weirdness about making first-person shooters, because when first-person shooters or third-person games like Uncharted, you're essentially telling the story. Like, if I had killed like 500 people, I would not be known as Ken Levine, the crazy archaeologist, or Ken Levine, the genetically modified dude. I'd be known as Ken Levine, the insane mass killer. and that's, so we sort of start with this weird proposition. I mean, Kelly's games are really interesting because they sort of live by their own rules, and they establish a world, and there's an abstractness which allows not to explain away some of these notions. And I think there's a degree of math that people do in their heads when they play, certain games, and when they watch movies. It's no different than Indiana Jones. He's not really an archaeologist. He's a psychopath. And I think, but the audience is willing to suspend their disbelief and do some degree of math where they say, well, maybe it's not really killing 6,000 people. Maybe it's killing 1 or 2, and that's okay because there's a reason. And so, but there's an important component of what makes a game, and there is generally a skill component. And lots of games have different ways of approaching that. Kelly's games have a certain way, Marcine's a different way, Paul's a different way, Marcine's a different way, and we have a certain way. And the reason I sort of ended up in first-person shooters is, the first-person experience is really a nice experience for exploring worlds. It's a nice vehicle. And I'm not a big fan of making puzzles. I don't know how to make a lot of puzzles. It's not really my thing. So, certainly it's killing people. It's this experience you do along with exploring the world and learning about whether it's, Elizabeth and Booker in BioShock Infinite or Andrew Ryan in BioShock 1. I'm not looking down on shooting in games. I'm an old school gamer. I love twitching. I love twitch mechanics. I love shooting. I love all that stuff. And I'm not, I don't think anybody's going to look at my games and say, Ken Levine and his company are on the forefront of, new abstract game design components. That's not me. But a lot of it is so we can create these worlds and tell these stories, but, what's blocking you from moving forward? A game like Heavy Rain deals with that problem by coming up with sort of puzzly experiences. And those are as abstract, as weird as mass murdering in their own way, because people don't really encounter those experiences in real life on a regular basis. But the audience makes allowances, So it really is, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question,
Well,
but I'm defending my own psychopath.
no problem.